You're about to watch a bonus video from our episode covering the Mask of Zorro. If you enjoy it, check out our full discussion where we talk about the real Zorro, the actors and the characters, the production, and the effect Catherine Zeta-Jones had on us as young boys. You can find the full episode here on our YouTube channel or wherever you find your podcasts.
And the story definitely holds up. It's interesting to the point where when they show the map, I'm like, well, I want to see that map in more detail, because I'd love to know, and I hope you're going to do this, I'd love to know that, like, the history behind all of it.
Well, since you ask, I guess this is as good a time as any for me to give you. I'm going to give you the history. I'll start with the history of Zorro and see how it ties in with the history of California. So California was occupied by the Spanish, as is implied by the story, until about 1821, which is when the movie starts. And basically at that point, Santa Anna, who is a real historical figure, basically claimed Mexico as being independent from, well, they basically took it back from the Spanish in the same way the Americans took the United States back from the British. So that is a real thing that happened. And then, from the 1820s until the 50s, California was part of the new state of Mexico. And basically in the 40s, there was a war between Mexico and the United States, and the United States won, and they got California as a result of it. So from the 50s, forever, California became part of the U.S. And that's all you really need to know for the history.
Yeah.
So you've got Spanish rule, Mexican rule, American rule. And it's very important for what I'm about to say about the history of Zorro. Zorro is based on a real person, a Mexican bandit called Joaquim Murrieta, which, if that name rings a bell, it's because that's the name of Alejandro's brother in the movie. Okay. So this is the real person Zorro was based on. His real story was that he was a Mexican miner in California after it became part of the United States and before the gold rush happened. And he was apparently quite a successful miner. There's a 20-minute video about the history of Zorro, which I'll put a link in the description, and it's super interesting and it'll give you far more details than I'm about to do. So he was a successful miner, and basically when the gold became known throughout the world and the Americans advertised it, a lot of Americans and people from all around the world came for the gold. And a lot of them didn't have the same success that he had had. So, long story short, they ruined his life. Some stories are that they raped and murdered his wife in front of him, and then abandoned him, and then left him for dead. Others, and both of these might have happened, was that they accused him and his stepbrother of being horse thieves, even though apparently they'd bought the horse legitimately, and then they lynched his brother or stepbrother. Basically, he was left with nothing, and it was all at the hands of American miners. And it was basically the Wild West at the time, and there was no law and order, and definitely not justice for a Mexican miner that had things stolen from by the Americans. So he went on a revenge spree and basically killed all the men who had, I think the main thing was killing his half-brother. So, yeah, he became this bandit, and then after that, he kept stealing gold from the Americans, from the government, and so he became a bit of a problem. As far as I can tell, there was no stealing from the rich, giving back from the poor, with Robin Hood.
Sounds a bit like
it does. I think it's more the fact that he was getting revenge. Apparently, he started getting revenge for other people that were being persecuted by Americans. So he became a bit of a folk hero. But the Americans sent in the Rangers, headed by Captain Love, the real Captain Love, Captain Harrison Love. And he was sent, and he found a group of bandits who they thought were the Murrieta. He had a gang at this point. It wasn't just him. It was the Murrieta gang. And there was a guy called Three-Fingered Jack in the gang. So he's also based on a real person. Yeah. And Captain Love found them. They killed them. They weren't 100% sure they got the right people because they didn't have photos or anything. But supposedly he killed the real Joaquim Murrieta, and he chopped off his head and kept it in a bottle of alcohol, which is why they do that in the movie. That was one of the things I said earlier that I never fully understand. I get that it makes him seem like a really sick, evil puppy, and we're happy when he gets killed. But I always found it weird, and then finding out that it was based on history was like super interesting.
I didn't know any of that. I'd always just assumed that it was just a bit of a made-up story. No, even though you get that bit at the beginning, I thought maybe they'd made that up as well.
So the history of that is true, but as I just said, all of this takes place in the 1850s, whereas the movie takes place before that, which is kind of the next chapter. So he supposedly got killed. Some people say that he didn't kill the right guy, so there was like a legend that he was still alive or whatever. But that's pretty much the end of the story for
The 18th
him.
century conspiracy story.
Yeah, exactly. Like if we have conspiracy theories now with the internet and everything, like back then they must have gone absolutely wild. So fast forward to the 1900s, and an American called Johnston McCulley wrote The Curse of Capistrano, which is the first ever Zorro book. This was published in 1919. It was one of those serials where they put, you put bits in the newspaper week after week, and it was eventually put as a book. So it was heavily based, supposedly, on the legend of Joaquin Murrieta. Joaquin was never known as Zorro, so this is really the beginning of Zorro. Zorro means fox in Spanish, and was part of the whole allure that he was able to evade bullets and get away from people.
Okay, so maybe you're going to tell me, but at what point does the whole black mask and hat and stuff?
In the book.
So that's basically fictional, right?
Yeah, that's all fictional. I mean, he might have dressed in black and moved around, but yeah, he never had that exact outfit. He never called himself Zorro. That will come. I mean, honestly, the character in the book is very different from the historical character, but everyone says that this isn't controversial, that he is based on this real life figure. Because, and this is now important with the movie, the backstory of Zorro in the book is that he is a Spanish nobleman. He's living in Mexico under the occupation of the Spanish, and he's Spanish himself. He's basically one of the Dons, like we see in the movie. But this is what De La Vega does in the movie. He's a Spanish nobleman living there, but who empathizes with the Mexican people who are being oppressed by the Spanish. So this American author made the very deliberate choice to take this story and move it back about 30 years, because in the real story, the bad guys are the Americans. And in this story, both the book and then in the movie, the bad guys are the Spanish/the Mexicans. So that is an important difference. And that's why when they decided in the movie, obviously it starts in the 20s and then it takes place in the 40s. So that's way before the Americans are actually involved. Okay. So the important characters to remember are Joaquin Murrieta, the real guy, is Alejandro's brother, who is actually killed at the beginning of the movie. And he's killed by Captain Love, who was based on a real figure. And then De La Vega, Anthony Hopkins's Zorro, is the one from the books. And then, so Alejandro as Murrieta did not exist in real life, did not exist in the books, but is kind of the one that's invented. So The Mask of Zorro is kind of a reboot of the Zorro story, kind of building off the book. And one of the things I love about it when you rewatch it is you can really, it almost feels like it's a sequel, because there's a lot of references in the first 20 minutes to the history that Anthony Hopkins and Don Raphael have. There's obviously the implication that Don Raphael has always been after his wife, he's been making his life hell for his whole time, and that's basically the history of the books. And then the movie is like saying, and this is kind of the post-New Zorro thing, and by paying an homage to the real character, they've made him in the movie, the brother to the person whose name of the original Zorro. So there's a really nice coming full circle element of the characters.
Wow.
So there you go.
There's a lot of information there. I did not know.
Thanks for watching. If you've made it this far, it would mean the world to me if you could drop a like on this video. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel or follow us wherever you get your podcasts for new episodes on the last Thursday of every month, where I sit down with my friends to discuss our favorite movies. But for now, thanks for checking out my film club.